So we've heard that Canada Day is a big day in Ottawa. We know it's, there are lots of parties on the Hill and stuff, but it's significant for another reason. And we've had some questions about that, and those questions are around CASL. So we've got Scott Smith here with us to talk about CASL. Scott's our chamber expert on CASL. And Scott, what is the significance of July 1st?
Significance of July 1st. There's lots of talk in the marketplace about what's going on with July 1st. It's a little bit of, I'm not going to say panic, but definitely consternation. And it has to do with the end of the transition period. And all that really means is that if you have a non-compliant consent that you've been relying on over the last 3 years since CASL was introduced, you will no longer be able to rely on that non-compliant consent. It means over the course of the last 3 years, you should have been gradually bringing your consents into compliance. And when I say a non-compliant consent, it means you had a business relationship with either a consumer or another business, and that transaction you may not have the appropriate records for, or there may be a longer time period, more than the allowed 2 years under CASL, where there's been no communications, two-way communications. You need to bring that into an express consent.
Okay, so...
But I got to stop you.
Yeah.
There's something that didn't happen it won't happen on July 1st, that was going to come into play, and that is the private right of action.
Ah.
So the private right of action provisions were delayed when the law first came into force in 2014. It was delayed for that 3-year transition period. It was supposed to come into force on July 1st of 2017, but the minister has graciously consented to indefinitely delaying that. It was bad for business. It was a definite business risk. The problem with the private right of action is that class action lawyers could then go after businesses for non-compliance, and there was no requirement to prove damages. The damages are statutory, so it could have been predatory on businesses from the part of class action lawsuits.
So that's a win for business.
That is absolutely a win for business.
That's great.
It was a big concern.
That's great. So what are the, if a business has not come to the compliance terms by July 1, what should they be doing?
Well, they have until July 1st to bring their consents into compliance, which means sending out a note to all of those customers where they don't have a valid consent under the CASL law, basically to get an express consent. If they don't do that before the July 1st deadline, then they'll have to find other ways to entice those customers back. They can no longer send CEMs if they don't have that valid consent.
So did CASL really achieve what it was supposed to do?
In a number of ways, no. I think we actually have a graphic where we can show you how the change in the volume of spam has been gradually dropping over the course of the last 10 years anyway. And the reason for that is the companies that manage your email have done a pretty good job at building filters to filter out spam. So the numbers run anywhere up to 99% of the spam that's actually in the system. Individuals will never see that.
Wow.
The real issue, I think now, more than spam, is cybersecurity. So you've all heard phishing schemes, and WannaCry a few weeks ago, and another big one yesterday.
Yeah.
The real issue is what comes in those spam emails, not the spam itself.
Okay.
So I think longer term, what our next steps are, we need to deal with some of the ambiguities in CASL. For instance, the definition of a CEM. When CASL was first introduced, or over the time period where the government was considering it, they went with a catch-all. So basically, any message that gets sent that has commercial content, be it bulk email or individual emails, were all considered commercial electronic messages and were captured under CASL. I think that definition needs to change. That will enable legitimate businesses, to send emails that serve a purpose in the marketplace.
Great. So what are our next steps, I guess?
Our next steps are actually crafting a report or a summary of what we think the changes that need to happen that go back to the government process. So as part of his statement, the minister a few weeks ago in delaying the private right of action also gave an indication that he will be instructing the INDU committee, which is the Industry Committee of Parliament, to do the statutory review of CASL. And we are now preparing for what we will need to say in order to make our case for that.
Oh, that's great. So thanks, Scott, for filling us in on what's topical on CASL. That's great. And thanks for joining us today, and happy Canada Day.
Happy Canada Day.